Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the OFN Meeting Room on the Our Football Radio Network. And before we get started, don't forget to order a subscription of America's #1 draft guide, the Our Draft Guide, seen right here. That's right, the Our Draft Guide. Log on to ourlads.com. Well, now we're going to talk Carolina Panthers football and find out how the Panthers have been doing this offseason. Very busy offseason. And we're going to do that by talking with Tim Weaver, managing editor for the Panthers Wire at USA Today. Tim, nice talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Tim. So the Panthers, probably one of, I'd say, a top 5 as far as busy off seasons in the NFL with so much turnover, including, when you lose Ron Rivera and Cam Newton, that just alone, that's huge. And you bring in Matt Rule, who has done a great job of rebuilding college football teams. Now he's going to try to do it in the pros. So how are the fans taking to the offseason?
They've had it better. I think they're a little bit shell-shocked right now, understandably. Ron Rivera was obviously the first domino to fall. Then you had Luke Kuechly retire out of nowhere all of a sudden. I was definitely taken off guard by that, despite knowing he had a history of concussions. He was still playing at a very high level, so that's just a very hard player to replace. There's some very good linebackers in this class, but taking Kuechly's shoes, that's going to be a very tall order for anybody. And you have Cam Newton, who probably the best player, or at least the most talented player in franchise history. They're entering a new era here. They're going to find out what it's like not to have a really marketable star in a relatively small market. It's been pretty tough for them, understandably. But like you said, Rule has done this before. That's why they brought him in. They're going to be paying him even more money than Andy Reid, so they're really gambling on him, his ability to rebuild these teams.
Yeah, and also ownership. How has fans taken to this new ownership?
I'd say at the moment that relationship is strained between the fans and the owner.
Already,
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just how the Cam Newton thing was handled. It didn't look good from a public relations kind of perspective. Newton said all along he wanted to stay in Charlotte. He wanted to be with the team. There was no real solid reporting on it, but apparently he wanted an extension. They weren't willing to give it, but they just weren't very forthcoming with how things were going. Newton said before the Super Bowl, I have no doubt that I want to be here, and he absolutely thought he was going to continue to play with the Panthers, and he was kind of blindsided by what they did. So it didn't come off as a good look, especially what Tepper said. He basically questioned his health when he was asked about Newton's comments. He said, well, how healthy is it? How healthy is he, basically? It just seems like a weird thing to do, because if you believe in him, you don't want to say that kind of thing. But if you're also trying to trade him, like they supposedly did, you tanked his value there a little bit. So they wound up getting a 5th-round pick for Kyle Allen, and then they got Cam Newton released for nothing. So it's just a very weird way that it played out. So understandably, fans are a little bit frustrated and I think confused by the way that happened.
And Matt Rule, I would think that with all the negativity, and then you hire Matt Rule, even though sometimes pro fans who don't follow college football, I could see them being very skeptical. Why can't I say that word today? Well, it's just, you know what I'm saying. So when you have a coach that again, if you don't follow college football, you don't know these guys very well. And a lot of these college coaches don't seem to translate in the NFL as much as you would like. But if you're a college football fan and an NFL fan, I would think that there would be a lot of Carolina fans that would be pretty excited about the move.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of excitement at first. Rule is probably the biggest gamble that they could have taken. The other guy who I think was the major candidate was Mike McCarthy, who they spoke with twice. That would have been more of a lateral move, I think. I'm not surprised that the Cowboys did what they did. I don't think he's much better than Jason Garrett based on what we saw the last few years. Obviously, they won a Super Bowl. He had a pretty good run, but considering he had peak Aaron Rodgers, you almost think that they should have won more than they did. So I like that they took a gamble on him. Obviously, it's a different world going from the college to the NFL, but they want somebody who's a program builder. And he did it twice. Yep. He did it pretty quick turnaround at Temple and at Baylor. These were one of the worst teams in their conferences, and he got them contending in just 2 years both times. So if he can pull that off again here, then it's one of the best coaching hires in recent history. But if he doesn't, it looks pretty bad.
Yeah, it's a gamble, but it's a good one. And I think the fans should be excited. And they also get this offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, who was an obscure assistant with the Saints 1 year. And now he is this prized assistant winning a national championship and grooming the number 1 overall pick the next. So what do you think he's going to bring to the offense? Is it too early to tell, scheme-wise?
It is too early to tell. But I'd be shocked if he's really radically different than what they ran last year at LSU and what Sean Payton has been doing with the Saints the last several years. I think they're really good at spreading the field out. You're going to see a lot of 4 and 5 receiver sets. Panthers never did anything like that under Ron Rivera. There's a lot of very old school stuff under both the last couple offensive coordinators, Norv Turner and Mike Shula. Especially just a lot of first down runs between the tackles, a lot of very frustrating play calls over and over. Cam Newton deserves a lot of credit for what he was able to do, especially in the 2015 season. His best receiver was Greg Olsen. Then that was it. That was basically the whole offense. It was Newton carrying them, and then his tight end was his best receiver for most of his time there. Yeah. So I'm expecting a lot more innovation, a lot more stuff that we haven't seen before. But obviously, Sean Payton knows what he's doing. It helps to have Drew Brees is probably the most accurate quarterback there's ever been, one of the best ever, obviously a Hall of Famer. Slight step down to Teddy Bridgewater, but he looked really good running that offense for 5 games last year. They went undefeated. It looks smooth. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to bring you back from a 10-point deficit or something like that, but he's a very effective game manager. He doesn't make mistakes, and I'm actually pretty excited to see what they do offensively. Defensively, it's going to be a little messy for a while, but I think the offense has a lot of potential.
Yeah, and it's also, you get Phil Snow, who's followed Rule around in both stops as his defensive coordinator, 64 years old, 37 years of coaching experience. So it's always good to have a guy like that, especially when you make the transition to college to the pro, someone who's been around a long time. Do we have any idea of how the defense will run? 4-3, 3-4? I know everybody does a little bit of both, but especially with the personnel that the team has right now, do you think they're going to just go by the personnel more than anything in the beginning?
It sounds like it's going to be more of a 4-3, but like you said, pretty much every team is multiple at this point. Only the Seahawks run exclusively a 4-3. That's pretty much it as far as the 32 teams are concerned. But the Athletic reported a while back that they're going to go back to a 4-3. Last year, they tried the 3-4, and it just didn't work out with the personnel they had. It was kind of a bad trade-off. The pass rush got really good. They were able to get to the quarterback consistently, but the run defense, they just didn't have enough size. They just got bullied around by every team. After the first 6 weeks or so, the teams caught on to that, and they just ran over them, and Rivera didn't make enough adjustments. I think that's the one thing that there are a lot of things that go in any NFL coach getting fired, but his inability to adjust fast enough to what was going on with his run defense, I think, is the main reason that he got canned more than anything else. So I think we'll see more 4-3. And having Quan Short back, that was another big factor.
Oh, yeah.
You can't blame Rivera for what happened to Cam Newton or for Short, but he's their best defensive lineman. You take any team's best defensive lineman away, and that's really going to hurt. So getting him back is going to help them a lot.
Okay, let's start the breakdown on offense with Cam Newton being out, Teddy Bridgewater in. So we don't really have to go into that. That's something that we can talk about when we're getting ready to talk about the regular season. But let's go back up, because Will Grier, who was a 3rd-round pick last year, is the only backup quarterback on the roster. He's got really no experience. So, and with Bridgewater's history of injuries, could we see Carolina as one of those teams that could actually pick up a quarterback somewhere between the 2nd and 4th rounds?
I think they could pick even earlier. Matt Rule talked to reporters last week. He wouldn't rule out taking quarterback at number 7.
Really?
We know Marty Herney actually went out to Oregon to see Justin Herbert throw, and this was right before everything in the country was shutting down. So he wanted to be there. He wanted to see him throw. And after, there's a photo of him walking up to Herbert saying, "Congratulations." He liked what he saw, apparently. So that wouldn't shock me at all if they take Herbert or based on who they have on their coaching staff. Jake Peetz is now their quarterbacks coach. He spent time in Alabama. I think it'd be really interesting if they were to trade up for Tua. I don't know if he's going to be their number 7. I know the hip is a big question mark with him. I think it's kind of overblown. He looks good to me. He had a throwing session that he shared with the teams virtually a while ago. He looked pretty good to me. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if they pick up another quarterback. But they did add P.J. Walker. That's something that's kind of gone under the radar. He was probably definitely the best quarterback in the XFL before they folded. He looked like Mahomes out there. Obviously it's a much lower level of competition, but he looked really, really good for a few weeks there. If they finish their season, I think he's the runaway MVP. So I've got him right now as the number 2 quarterback, and Greer is kind of on the margins. They've been talking to some very small school prospects, guys I just didn't even know their names. Yeah. So I don't think that bodes very well for Greer's future right now.
Okay. And so if they were to use their first-round pick on a quarterback, considering the amount of money that went into Bridgewater, I haven't broken down his contract. So how would that work? Give me, because the more I understand the potential look of it, the more I might believe he would go with a quarterback with that first pick. So how does that contract make sense in any way if they use their first pick on a quarterback? Because that's a lot of investment at the quarterback position.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird. That's why I think that they should have given Newton another year. I don't think if he was going to hold out, that's one thing, but I think it would have been better just let him play out that last year. At $19 million, that's a pretty good price for a quarterback these days. Bridgewater's cap hit this year is going to be $14 million. Then it's going to blow up to about 2025 the next couple of years. They can't really get rid of him. Like there's no until the 3rd year of his contract. It's a 3-year, $63 million deal. Okay. They're kind of stuck with Bridgewater, so he's going to be there whether he's starting or not. Okay. But it definitely wouldn't shock me if they pick a rookie, especially if they plan to redshirt them. Like if they're worried about Tua's hip, they could just kind of like let him learn the system and sit for a year. Absolutely. Like Mahomes did behind.
Absolutely. That makes sense.
Yeah. I think if they really believed Bridgewater was their guy, they would have given him longer than a 3-year deal. It's in his name. They may see him as a bridge option, literally. So that wouldn't surprise me at all.
Sticking with the offense, McCaffrey got the big deal. And, it's interesting. A few years ago when he came out, I was talking with Dan Shonka. We were doing draft shows at the time. And I said, look, Dan, I know I don't want anybody to overreact or think that, I'm going out and I'm, la la land with this analysis, but I said, I think Christian McCaffrey could be the best player in this draft. And I think he's so good he could be the first pick. I know he's not going to be the first pick, but I could see him being the first pick. And this is why. You saw this in college. The kid is amazing. And I know running backs, even nowadays, don't ever get picked in the first round, no matter how good they are. And even right now, I'm not even sure Christian McCaffrey would be picked number 1, knowing what he's doing because of the running back position. But as good as he is, and with all the touches, and his durability is great so far, but doesn't the team need to add in a really capable number 2 and start to limit his workload?
I definitely think they need to limit it. He had over 400 touches last year. History says, I don't care how great of an athlete he is. I sat across from him for an interview last year, and he is absolutely built. But I don't care who you are. If you take 400 touches a year, you're not going to last very long in this league or any other league. So I would be shocked if they don't pick another running back, probably on day 3. Just somebody to give him a change of pace, give him a breather. He just very rarely came off the field last year. At one point, he was playing like 97% of the snaps.
Crazy.
You just don't want to do that. I don't care how great he is. You're risking him too much. Yes, you want to have the max value for every play. You don't really want to take him off the field, but 400 touches is just too many to keep up with, even for a 23-year-old, even for one who's obviously a very special athlete. And it is pretty remarkable that he has avoided major injuries so far, given his workload. I think he had a pretty minor shoulder surgery last offseason, but didn't seem to affect him, obviously. This was one of the best years we've seen any running back had. At one point, he was on pace to break Chris Johnson's record for yards from scrimmage. So extremely impressive stuff. But I think you want somebody who can come in and just give him some relief. Maybe someone like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who played at LSU for Brady, would make a lot of sense for them.
Good one. All right. Not only the Newton era is gone, and the Kuechly era is gone, and the Rivera era is gone, but so is the Greg Olson era. That is finished. He's moved on. Now, Ian Thomas had the nice rookie season, and everybody just assumed, well, great find. He's going to take off. But Greg Olson got back to being healthy last year, and all of a sudden, Ian Thomas was kind of in, at least it looked like he was in the doghouse. So even though they added in a free agent, and I'm assuming that Thomas is going to get the chance to be the guy again this year, but that's still kind of an unknown, right? This is a position that we could see the Panthers adding in the draft.
Absolutely. I actually just the most recent article I did was on the potential of trading for OJ Howard for this reason. I like Ian Thomas. I think he has a lot of potential, but I'm not sure about his hands. He dropped one or two too many passes for me to think that, okay, he's definitely going to be a tight end number one and you can rely on him for the future. I'm not sure he's that yet. He was only a fourth round pick. It's not like he's not a bust or anything, but it's also definitely not a guarantee that he's going to be a long-term starter, given where they picked him. Howard, he's really fallen off since his first couple of years. He was essentially benched last year, only had one touchdown. I just don't think Tom Brady would trust him. That sounds like maybe that's the reason they're looking to trade him. That just came out yesterday. I think it would make a lot of sense to see if you can get him for a fourth or a fifth or maybe a sixth if you're lucky. That would be a good move. Apparently, back in the day, they really liked Howard. This was when Gettleman was the general manager, not before Hurney came back. They had him number 2 on their board after McCaffrey. So I assume there's still some of the same people. I know there's been just a lot of turnover the last few years with this front office, but probably the same people to some extent. They had him very high. So I would like to see them try to swing a trade for him. But if not, you can pick up somebody like Thaddeus Moss maybe. It's not a great tight end class, but he's just another guy, they seem to love their guys. They've already signed 4 former Temple players. So I wouldn't be shocked if they take a couple of LSU guys as well.
And we know LSU's got some receivers too, wide receivers too. And when you have a class this deep, anything is possible. But I kind of look at this receiver core for Carolina after adding Cooper, Anderson, and even Seth Roberts, of course. That the 2 young guys, Moore and Samuel, are progressing finally. It's looking like a pretty decent unit. I'm not saying it can't look better, but I don't think it's a necessity, right?
Oh, definitely not. I think it's their strongest unit on paper right now. Moore looked really good down the stretch. It's funny, Steve Smith, he has cruel and unusual methods, but he gets results. Like he kind of called out the receivers on the radio, and that Sunday Moore just kind of blew up, and he started, having 100-yard games every week pretty much until he got injured near the end. He was looking very good. His route running developed. Made some good contested catches. He improved in the areas that he needed to a lot down the stretch. So he's going to be their number 1. Samuel, he couldn't get going because I think he didn't have Cam Newton. Kyle Allen, we love him. He couldn't hit those deep balls. Samuel was open I don't know how many times. They just weren't able to find him. But very good number 2. And then you bring in Robbie Anderson, who's at least as good as Samuel, probably even better as far as the deep balls go. He's very, very underrated in that respect. Watched a highlight reel from last year. Sam Darnold had a very good rapport going with him. I know Bridgewater doesn't quite have, that's not what he's known for, is throwing, 30 yards down the field, but he can hit it. He'll surprise you occasionally. You saw the game against the Buccaneers last year, week 5. He looked really good in that one. He was finding Michael Thomas pretty consistently on those deep throws. So I think the wide receiver core is probably as strong as any unit on the team right now. Maybe that's Matt Rule mentioned this a while back, but sometimes you just go with your fastball. Right now, I think the fastball is that wide receiver room, so it wouldn't surprise me if they add somebody else. Maybe you just double down, and like some teams, like the Rams for a while, they just had that great defensive line. They kept rebuilding and rebuilding. Sure. The Cowboys with that offensive line for a few years just kept investing in it until it became a really, really good group. So it wouldn't shock me at all if they pick up another receiver, even in the first round. I know they met with Jerry Jeudy at the Combine. It wouldn't surprise me if they pick up Denzel Mims, who's at Baylor. He's the best prospect who played for Rule last year. So that'd be somebody I think they might target if they were to trade down. I think 7 is a little bit early for him. But if they were to move down into the teens like they're supposed to be doing, that's the rumor going around recently, is they're going to trade down a few spots. I think that would be right in their range if they're looking at him.
Yeah, I'm being a Jet fan, and I do the Jets FM show here on the network, and I will say that, yeah, Robbie Anderson made his career, and I used to say it for the couple of years, he's a one-trick pony, can't pay big money to a guy who basically just, a stretch the defense kind of guy who's going to run fly patterns and so forth. But last year, under we had the former Pittsburgh Steeler wide receiver, escapes me right now, but he did a really good job coaching up Anderson, and I had never seen Anderson make better, more consistent, tough catches over the middle. He was looking almost like a number one receiver for a little while, and that's something that he had not done before. So I would be very, very up. I think his ceiling is definitely high right now, and even though he still has that burst in his game, very fast kid, and is going to provide that deep game, he does have the ability to do more than I think fans outside of New York understand. So I think Carolina's got a good one.
No, definitely. I think with him, you have on certain teams, definitely not this one. You have three potential number one receivers. The Bears could use somebody like Curtis Samuel. A lot of teams could use Moore or Robbie Anderson. They would all be the best receiver on a few different teams around the league. So they're already pretty deep at this spot. If they add one more good receiver, and there's a ton of them in this draft, you can probably wait to day 3 to get another one. I think you can argue they would have the best wide receiver core in the league going into 2020.
Okay, offensive line and the Panthers. Actually, it looked like they're in pretty decent shape. They traded for Russell Okung and also signed John Miller. You would expect Paradis will have a better year this year after the injury. First year back, that always happens. But I kind of like some of the young, and Moton's a solid right tackle, but you look at a couple of the young guys they got last year, Little, who had some injuries, as you know, and Dennis Daly's intriguing. So there does seem to be a little bit more depth and talent. They can mix and match a little bit here and there with tackle and guard with a few players. I'm not saying that they're set, but a lot's going to depend on the health of Russell Okung and whether or not John Miller can solidify his spot on that line as well. And like I said, Paradis has a better year than last year. But I think there's some promise on the offensive line, especially with those 2 draft picks from last year.
Yeah, you definitely don't need to blow the whole thing up. Just seems to be a meme every offseason now. Panthers fans, I see this on Facebook because I'm on every day. It'll be a random article about something else. The first comment will often be, fix the offensive line. Like that's the only thing they care about because it's been problematic for so long. But, on paper, I don't think you really need to change the players that much. I think getting a new coach in is going to help them more than anything. Pat Meyer was with Okung with the Chargers the last 2 years. That was a big reason why they made that trade. Not crazy about that trade. Turner wasn't the player that he used to be, but still, he's 5 years younger than Okung. He was still a Pro Bowler every year. I wouldn't have made that trade, but I understand why they did. They just so desperately needed a real left tackle, which they haven't had since Jordan Gross retired, really. But you're only getting Okung for 1 year, and he did have a health issue. It's not like he had an ankle injury; he had a pulmonary embolism. So, that's not a minor health issue. If that comes up again, or if he gets injured again, he's a 31-year-old tackle with a lot of experience. So, if he gets hurt, that's definitely a problem. The X factor beyond just Okung, I think, is Paradis having the bounce back year. Maybe it was the leg injury the year before. He just wasn't quite himself, but he struggled. But part of that, the offensive line it's a complete unit, more than perhaps the secondary is the exception. Every other position group, they all function together. One guy cannot do it alone. And the issues at left guard, I think, were a problem for him too. He just had to keep compensating and going over and dealing with guys coming in from his left flank. So I think an improvement at left guard will help him too. But I like the John Miller signing. That he was just so cheap. So that makes the Trey Turner trade a little better. The price that they got John Miller for, you're getting a good starter there at right guard at a much cheaper price. Yeah, I think the line is going to be much better than people assume it will be, but most of it is going to be on the coaching. The problem has been the last few years, they're a very good run blocking unit. You see some of these highlight plays that Christian McCaffrey had last year. There's these massive holes that open up. The famous one against the Cardinals, he had like 3 or 4 runs that were 75 plus yards because they had huge holes open up for him. They're a very good run blocking unit, but the pass protection has been a problem. So if they can just, I don't know. That's obviously over my pay grade telling an offensive lineman what to do. Sure. There's a reason why I get paid to talk about this, and Pat Myers to coach these guys, but they just find a way to balance that out a little bit better and coach up the pass protection. I think they'll improve a lot.
Is there a chance that they, because there is the possibility we're going to see 4 offensive tackles drafted in the top 10. Is there a chance that the Carolina Panthers go with a left tackle?
I would be surprised if it's a left tackle because they still have Greg Little. His rookie season was kind of lost because of his concussions and his ankle injury, but I think that he's still going to be the long-term option there. Definitely not certain about that. But a right tackle, I could definitely see. Someone I like is Jedrick Wills. Taylor Moton has been their best lineman the last 2 years, but he's going into the last year of his rookie contract, and he was picked by Gettleman. This is not the same regime. So the fact that they haven't given him an extension yet, like they gave McCaffrey an extension before the right tackle, it's not how you're supposed to do it if you're doing analytics, if you're up on the latest how you're supposed to build a modern roster kind of thing. But the fact that they haven't extended Moton yet kind of gives me concern that maybe they're thinking about not keeping around long term. And if that's true, then I really like Wills. Maybe number 7. Maybe if they're going to trade down 10 or 11. He's a classic mauler. He just has that look about him. He towers over certain guys. I think he'd be a great surprise pick for them at number 7.
Okay. On defense, one of the mistakes I think Marty Hurney made last year when I did the preview is I thought he was going to go defensive back, and he didn't. And I think they're paying for it now when you take a look at what's going on there. Bradbury's gone at corner, because Reed's gone, which I think is okay at safety. And maybe both of these guys were – I think it was smart maybe to let them both go anyway. But it's just the coverage bare at corner. It looks like this has to be not just one corner added in the draft, unless they add somebody in free agency, but maybe 2 corners added in the draft.
They definitely need to double up at corner and maybe even triple. I know they had a video meeting with Emmett Robertson, who's probably the best slot corner in this class. So they need somebody to replace Bradbury, who's going to start opposite Dante Jackson, who got benched last year. He's the best cornerback on the roster, and he got benched late last year. So that gives you an idea of what the situation is right now. And the slot corner, Javian Elliott, is also gone. They didn't bring Ross Cockrell back, who was their best backup outside guy. He played pretty well. I don't know why they don't bring him back. So right now, if the season were to start today, you'd have Dante Jackson and a tackling dummy starting outside. That's obviously very problematic. I think you pick the second round sounds about right. If Jeff Okudah is there at 7, you definitely take him. That's a pretty easy choice. I don't think Isaiah Simmons is obviously the number one, the guy that you're going to hear over and over connected to the Panthers, and you take him too. Either way, you can't go wrong. But if you don't have Okudah, then I think you wait till the second round or third round. There's a lot of good cornerbacks in this class, and then do it again. Why not hit third and fourth round, pick up a cornerback? I don't think you can wait till day 3 to address that. I would go just take whoever you like most in the first round and then start hitting these holes on defense. I know Eric Reed wasn't what he used to be, but I wasn't crazy about them releasing him. It wasn't good for the cap. It actually made the situation worse for this year. Now you got to replace him. I like bringing Trey Boston back. I thought he deserved that deal a lot. But I'm not sure about Justin Burris, who they're going to start. He hasn't been a starter yet. If that works out, great. But I think you need a contingency plan at strong safety. I don't know who it is. Maybe you can get somebody who's capable of playing that spot and slot corner, like maybe Kevon Wallace from Clemson. That would be a really good pick. But yeah, the secondary, very, very bad shape right now. I think they need 2 cornerbacks and maybe a safety as well.
And then at linebacker, you mentioned Simmons. Who knows if he'll be there? But if he is, it does make sense because we really don't know, again, whether this is going to be a 4-3, 3-4, whatever. But more than likely, I agree with you. They're probably going to be more 4-3. When that happens, you do wonder whether or not the linebacker position becomes that important in the top 10 if you run a 4-3 defense. But Simmons is that type of a rare athlete that you just plug him in and he can do so much for you. So I would get that. It's really good to know that you bring in Whitehead and you already have Shaq Thompson, and those guys are kind of flexible where you can put them in the defense. So as you're trying to figure out the new system and personnel, you have a couple of linebackers that are kind of interchangeable and where you can put them, but missing Kuechly is just so huge.
Yeah, you can't replace Kuechly, no matter what you do. I think him and Bobby Wagner are 1A and 1B as far as the best linebackers of this generation easily. Take either one. I don't think you can go wrong. But you know, we don't know who's going to replace him yet. Actually, Matt Rule hasn't said if it's going to be Shaq Thompson taking over, that having the plays relayed to him in his headset, or if it's going to be Whitehead. It would make sense, I think, for Whitehead to do it because he's worked with Rule before. He's got a little more experience than Thompson. But long term, I don't know. I think it may be better just let Thompson is going to have to take over that role eventually, given the 4-year deal they just gave him. Hopefully, Rule likes him as a player. If not, then that's going to turn out to be a very bad deal. That was right before he was hired, so he didn't really have a hand in that. We don't know who's going to be the defensive play caller now, but signing Whitehead definitely helps a lot, and I think makes it much less likely that they're going to take someone like Simmons early. Maybe you wait a little longer. I know Kenneth Murray is kind of one of those risky, potential, high risk, high reward kind of prospects. But I wouldn't be shocked if they pass on linebackers this year. Simmons is just so special. You take him. That's just like a no-brainer. I think Cam Chancellor is probably the best comp for him. I'm a Seahawks fan. I love watching Chancellor. But it doesn't even do him justice. He's much more athletic. He's better in coverage. He's not going to blast a receiver the way Chancellor would. Just kind of intimidate the entire defense. But I would rather have a guy who's going to play 7 different positions. Chancellor he played a lot of roles, wore a lot of hats in Carroll's defense for those years. And if you can get someone to do a similar role and even more athletic, that's a very, very easy pick. If Simmons is there, you take him.
And then finally on the defensive line, you lose Addison, you lose Butler, Irvin, McCoy, Poe. That's a lot of talent, especially with a scheme that we figure will be a 4-3. But you move Brian Burns into the defensive line. So, and then Weatherly was added to the team, and hopefully Short is going to be healthy. But still, this is a unit that needs to have maybe a run stuffer at nose tackle, and definitely more help in the pass rush, because the pass rush, as bad as the run defense was, you just lost too much talent. You got to have somebody else out there other than Brian Burns.
Yeah, Brian Burns looks pretty lonely right now at the top of that depth chart on the outside. They lost Bruce Irvin and Mario Addison, who were starting last year. I think that's actually a good move. They're both 32 years old. They're not going to be in your long-term plans, but you need somebody to replace them. I don't even know who the number 2 is right now after Burns. So I think you want to pick up an edge. Chase Young is going to be out of reach. There's just no reason to think about that. But there's some other good prospects you can get on day 2, maybe. Michigan State, Kenny Wilkes. I like him as an early day 3 option for them. Maybe you don't need to go first round there, but because I really, really like Burns, he's just gonna explode. Maybe not this year, maybe next year, but you see the potential with him. I think he's going to be. He has Von Miller like potential. I think that's the closest comp for him. But he's bigger and just more athletic. He's just going to be really, really special. It's a shame the way that they didn't use him. That's another big reason why Rivera got fired. I think he just didn't use Burns right. He was playing gunner at times, which is it's an interesting idea, but he needs to be pitting his ears back and getting to the quarterback every single play. And he didn't get nearly enough playing time, in my opinion. So I'm excited to see more of him, definitely.
Give me your pick then, if they stay at 7.
That's tough. I know right now I've done so many mock drafts. I've seen so many that I have to go purely on gut. I think it's going to be a receiver. I think they go with Judy or CeeDee Lamb.
You're thinking receiver because the other needs are just not going to be there if they stay at 7. Like, let's say Simmons gets drafted early, Okudah gets drafted before, and most people believe Simmons and Okudah won't be available. So if they're not available and Young is not available, then that's why and maybe it's too early for other positions. If you stay at 7, then why not take the top wide receiver on the board?
Right. I'm not, Derek Brown is the name you've seen probably been connected. I think he was Mel Kiper's first pick. So whoever that pick is, that's going to be the name you hear more than any other. Simmons eventually overtook him, I think, as far as mock draft popularity. But I don't know if he's worth the number 7 pick. And you're right. If you can't get Young or Simmons or Okuda, it might be worth trading down or just taking someone else. Maybe just the best playmaker available. But I just have a feeling they're going to go wide receiver. I have a feeling they want to dominate that position. You can. I like that idea of just building on a strength until it becomes an area that you can dominate another team in.
I like that.
And they need the help. The NFC South probably has more talent at receiver than anywhere other division. It's getting even harder. The Saints added Emmanuel Sanders. They desperately needed someone to help up Michael Thomas, and they have that now. Obviously, Julio Jones is still around, and good luck with him. The Bucks have 2 very, very good wide receivers. I have them both in my top 10. So you need cornerbacks, and you also need some more firepower to kind of keep up these guys. So cornerbacks and wide receivers, I think, are at premium as far as NFC South teams this year, I think.
I think your battery is running low. Is that your battery noise? Is that the battery running low?
I think that was a Twitter notification.
I know you've been holding that phone for a half hour, so I appreciate that, Tim. And tell me what Panther fans need to do to check you out. Again, just USA Today, Panthers Wire, anything else? It's Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
Going to be at the Panthers Wire. The website is pantherswire.usatoday.com. Not on Twitter myself, but the work account keeps me busy, so that's good.
Okay, well, Tim, great job for the first time coming on here on the Lads Football Radio Network. We really appreciate your time, and I'll definitely give you a ring after the draft, and maybe we could do it again.
Definitely. Sounds good.
Thanks, Tim.